It is the Mark Thompson Show on KGO, and it is my favorite part of Friday, hearing all about movies. It is time to welcome Michael Snyder. He comes and goes on a rainbow. Michael Snyder, everybody from the Marina Times, and of course Mark Thompson off this week, but we still want to welcome you and talk about movies. What's going on, buddy?
Well, we're on the movie beat as usual. I enjoyed yesterday's autumnal equinox, or as I call it the freakwinox, because, that's how I lead my life. This is so perfect that you're in for, Mark, because the major films opening this weekend or that we're covering are very woman-centric. So shall we get to it?
Let's do it.
Okay, so the incandescent and tragic life of movie actress and international icon Marilyn Monroe, born Norma Jean Baker, is a matter of public record, and kind of a cautionary tale about fame and a heartbreaking story of a talented, charismatic woman eaten alive by what was in the 1950s and 1960s of her heyday, the male-dominated world of show business. So Blonde is the latest attempt to tell Marilyn's story, albeit with fictionalized elements and flights of fancy, and it does get some things right. For one thing, it stars Cuban-born Ana de Armas, who should be familiar from her very memorable work in the recent 007 movie, No Time to Die. She was in the comedy Whodunit, Knives Out. She's magnetic. And despite her Latina roots, de Armas does an uncanny recreation of MM here. And it's not a cheap impersonation. The hair, the makeup, the wardrobe are impeccable. It really seems like de Armas is in Marilyn's skin, fully clothed or topless. And spoiler alert, Kim, she is the latter in more than a few scenes.
Oh, wow. So it's not just how she looks. Does she have the voice down? And
she has the voice, everything. There's not a trace of her Hispanic accent, which, there's a lilt to it if you see her in interviews. That's all gone. It's fully Marilyn. And this is, a relentlessly tragic look at the exploitation of a woman torn between her desire to be plain old Norma Jean and the cravings of the film industry and the masses who want that glamour and sensuality of Marilyn. And there's very little respite from the sadness. This is 2 hours and 45 minutes long, too. But to say in its favor, it's artfully assembled in black and white and color, remarkable evocations of photos, magazine covers, movie clips. But, man, it's an endurance test. Just quickly, Bobby Cannavale and Adrian Brody are quite good as the husbands who Norma Jean hoped would address her daddy issues, which are heavily hit upon here. But these characters are drawn in broad strokes, especially Cannavale's Joe DiMaggio. Blonde sometimes feels like a lurid parade of celebrity tabloids, Marilyn wasn't the first Hollywood star to get TMZ'd before there was even a TMZ, but man, she got it bad, and it did damage, and that's on display throughout Blonde. Not docudrama, but so much exactitude in the recreations. It's based on Joyce Carol Oates' novel, which was inspired by the legend's life, directed by Andrew Dominic, who adapted the novel. And there are some scenes that are conjecture and dreamscapes. And ultimately, this pastiche of the real and the surreal is exhausting. It's just exhausting. But if you're interested in Marilyn Monroe, the performance by Ana de Armas is absolutely worth watching. No question. It's in theaters now and streaming on Netflix next Friday.
Would you say that you liked it, or would you just say it's too long to get through?
It's long to get through. I'm glad I spent time, but it's terribly flawed. And like I said, it's exhausting.
Exhausting. Okay. And I wonder if have you heard anything about that movie where the people are saying that's not accurate as far as her life, or is it a pretty accurate representation of what she went through? Like I said, there's a lot of conjecture here. It's based on a novel, which was, of course, inspired by Marilyn's life, the Joyce Carol Oates thing. So there is fictionalization going on. So that argument is sort of moot. But speaking of tabloid madness, because she really generated a lot of it, Don't Worry, Darling has generated a ton of it. As filmmaker and actress Olivia Wilde is being excoriated by some parties over how she made this movie. Her first directorial effort, Booksmart, was well received, and I was looking forward to this one. It's about a loving married couple named Alice and Jack who are neighbors with other happy couples in a pristine 1950s Futura-style southwestern suburban housing development. Very, like modern, in the concept of modern from the mid-50s. So Jack and all his male buddies in the neighborhood are something called the Victory Project every morning, leaving their wives to housekeeping until dinner time, and everything seems idyllic until Alice starts sensing something's just not right. Even as her husband, her best friends, and the Victory Project CEO try to dispel any qualms. Alice is played by the ever-engaging Florence Pugh. You may know her from Midsummer, Fighting with My Family. She's Yelena Belova in Marvel's Black Widow, and she was the title character in the miniseries The Little Drummer Girl. And she does the best she can with what she's given by Kate Silberman's script. Alice's husband, Jack, is played by the pop singer-turned-actor Harry Styles.
How does he do in that?
He's okay. I mean, he's keeping up with her and with Chris Pine, who plays the Victory CEO, and Wilde, who is sort of the affable wife next door. And the 50s aspect, it was an era when women were often reduced to wives and mothers subservient to their husbands, or that was the idea. Makes this thing kind of reminiscent of the Stepford Wives. In other words, the gals are second-class citizens, tasked with pleasing their hubbies, and there's clearly something sinister afoot. And the feminist message intended by Wilde here is laudable. The cast is game, the art direction is fab, but the high-concept aspects are so sketchy that the dramatic results are kind of low yield. There's kind of a twisty Jordan Peele, M. Night Shyamalan thing going on here, but like kind of a fancy vintage T-Bird on a desert run with no service station in sight. This kind of runs out of gas. Don't Worry, Darling is in theaters.
Okay, runs out of gas. That's my comment. I'm writing them all down. Catherine Called Birdie. This is a weird name for a movie. What's this about?
Well, it's a medieval coming-of-age comedy. It's the movie of these three that I had no reservations about, that I really like. It's set in the vintage year of 1290 and features the antics and struggles of a mischievous 14-year-old girl played with endless appeal by young British actress Bella Ramsey. The girl's parents are the lord and lady of an English village. They're financially strapped, and they are dead set on marrying her off to a wealthy husband of any age, whether she likes it or not. I mean, you could argue that it's a worse situation for a female than the lot of a housewife in the 1950s, as in the previous film. But despite the dark and backward setting, Catherine Called Birdie, and by the way, the title comes from our young heroine's name and nickname. This is breezy fun to watch, and it's adapted from a well-regarded novel. Smart, amiable, endearing, and surprisingly, this was the shocker because I had no idea until the end credits, it was written and directed by someone I have often found to be talented but insufferable, Lena Dunham, creator and star of HBO's super woke New York City hipster rom-com series Girls. With Catherine Called Birdie, Dunham has made something delightful, absolutely delightful, in what would seem to be a stretch for her, but it becomes an unlikely but terrific platform to extol the importance of and the need for female empowerment, like to counter centuries of oppression. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Anyway, as an adaptation of a book instead of something totally original from Dunham, less overbearing than what I've seen from her previously, while still delivering on the feminist sensibilities. And I love the cast, from Ramsey, who is best known as the young Lyanna Mormont on Game of Thrones, to Andrew Scott of Sherlock and Fleabag as her father, and Billie Piper of Doctor Who and Penny Dreadful as her mother. I really enjoyed Catherine Called Birdie.
And where can you see it?
It is actually in theaters at the moment, but guess what? Hang in there, because it's going to be streaming on October 7th, which is kind of a cool thing.
That's not so far away. I wanted to ask you if you'd seen Clerks 3.
I actually have seen Clerks 3, and if you've seen Clerks 1 and 2, and you're a fan of this fellow Kevin Smith, I think it would probably appeal to you. And, I won't make a big deal about, either you're on the Kevin Smith bus or you're not. Instead, I'll just say that having watched the first two movies and not, having an axe to grind particularly, I kind of was caught up in it. You're basically checking in with the characters from Clerks 1 and Clerks 2. The Clerks 1, the first movie, gave him his career. And it's like 1994, and it's so many years later, and he got the entire gang back together. And I thought that people were committed to it, and there are some kind of cool cameos. There's even an A-lister in there whose name I won't mention, but I will say that Brian O'Halloran and Jeff Anderson, who play the two guys running the convenience store in Jersey in Clerks and Clerks 2, they are back, and they decide after some discussion to participate in making a movie based on the convenience store. So it's one of those meta films, right? Because that's basically what Smith did. It's his own creative journey. One colleague here likened this movie to digging on junk food, a guilty pleasure, but there's real heart. And Smith has such a deep understanding and affection for the characters that it even kind of can get to you, if you've watched the other movies. Unless you know what Snooches Booches is, I'd probably pass on this. But Clerks 3 for the fans is probably a treat.
Well, that's awesome. Okay, so a quick recap. You Blonde, the docudrama of Marilyn Monroe. You are glad you watched it, but you called it too long and exhausting. Don't Worry, Darling. Traditional families involved in something secret and sinister. You said it ran out of gas. Catherine called Birdie smart and endearing. You said you loved it and you were surprised by it. And Clerks 3, you said if you like Clerks 1 and 2, you'll like number 3. So, thank you so much.
Exactly.
Michael Snyder, he comes and goes on a rainbow, the culture blaster. It is Michael Snyder from the Marina Times. We thank you so much for being here. We'll do it again next Friday, as Mark is off next Friday as well.
You got it, Kim. So long.
Thanks, Michael.